Thank you for auditing Professor Sky's Record Review, the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who's doing something totally different today. You see, I live a double life. On the one hand, I am a full-time tenured French professor at a university, and on the other hand, I am an amateur music reviewer on YouTube. Today, I'm going to bring these two things together by sharing one of my lectures with my YouTube channel. Now, I call people who watch my videos auditors because those are the people who get to hear my thoughts and get to hear me speak, but never have to take a test, never have to have me grade a paper, don't have to attend. It's a very nice kind of hands-off relationship to the information I'm trying to share. I'm making this video equally for them as I am for my students who will have to watch this, who are going to have to write down take notes and send me the notes by email, and I'm going to be grading them. So it's kind of a fun view into what it is like actually in a Professor Sky classroom. Although they don't call me Professor Sky, they call me Monsieur Paine. That's my sort of professional name. So I'm going to edit this for them so that it starts right after this little preamble. But don't, if you just like me talking about new music and you're not interested in seeing what I actually teach, or if you're not interested in the way that France's colonial history fundamentally shifts and changes the way its hip hop is made, then just wait for my next video. I'm going to be doing more things like that. But if you're interested in the more sort of like intellectual side and maybe the more actual professorial side of this channel, then stick around. But I won't be offended if you don't watch this. So I'm about to let in the rest of my students here. They're not going to be here. I'm going to be recording this. I better scratch my nose before I start for real. I'm going to be doing share screen, desktop 1. All right. So I always have a little bit of trouble with Zoom. All right. Good. So let's get to the class and begin now. Good morning, class. As you can tell, I'm not in school today. I'm not having class live like I normally do. Instead, I am teaching to you through a video that I recorded. You are going to get all the same information and you need to take notes. I'm going to have you scanning notes and sending them to me by email no later than noon today, Monday, the 19th of October, okay? So I want you to take notes on every song and everything that you think is important and send it to me, and that will be your attendance. Sorry, I can't make it. Today's an interesting class, though. We've been learning a lot about the nature of French colonial activity, the way that it colonized and the effect that it had on the colonized. We learned about the Black Code, which was a code that was used to try to regulate slavery. We learned about how the triangular trade really helped out France and made it much of the wealthy power that it was in the 18th and 19th century. And we also learned about North Africa and the way that the Algerian War absolutely tore apart both Algeria and France. The fight for independence that the Algerians led to a very, very bloody, torture-filled battle in which both sides resorted to torturing and murdering children at any cost. It ended with the result of the French not having their colony anymore, and ended with a very broken, very, very sad and blood-stained country of Algeria. Now, how does all of this tie together with French hip-hop, which is what you're here to study? Well, the thing is the way that this colonial history makes its impact on French hip-hop is what makes French hip-hop so unbelievably interesting. We studied rock and roll, but for the most part, French rock and roll is just kind of an echo of American rock and roll. They didn't do much more. They weren't saying much more than what American rock and rollers were saying. Hip hop is the voice of the voiceless in every country, no matter where it is. And every country has different voiceless people. So we're going to study today the way that this history of colonization, this history of multiple countries of origin, this history of immigration, the way that that completely shaped French hip hop. So this class is based on the idea of music reflecting life. And in that, I mean that music reflects like societal values and reflects culture. It captures the zeitgeist, right? But this class is going to be going a little bit further. And if you're taking notes at home for the class, I suggest you write this down because you're going to be saying it a lot for the rest of the semester. And that is this sentence: musical style reflects social identity. So we're going to be studying how one's social identity, that is to say, how does one identify themselves within the larger society, within different cultures and subcultures and different groups, how can that be seen just in the musical style? Now, if this were a normal class, I would have you get together and write up something on a table right to talk about the Algerian War, which we talked about last Friday. I'm not going to have you do that now, but I will just emphasize this fact that it was a source of shame in two different ways. One way is that France lost the war. They no longer had their colony. And the other one was that it was such an inhuman and despicable war. Absolutely a terror of human rights violations everywhere, an absolute source of shame. Now, we're going to be starting here because we just talked about Algeria. If you don't know, this part of the world is called the Maghreb. It's these countries, okay? Morocco, Mauritania, Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya. This whole part of North Africa is called the Maghreb. And the majority of, I don't know if the majority, but many immigrants, I believe the majority of immigrants to France come from one of these countries in North Africa. Many of these countries were not only colonies, but just considered a part of France. A very kind of complicated concept. So how does that influence the way that the music is made? Well, let's take an example. Let's take a very interesting example from these artists here, Freeman and Khaled Leroy. And this is going to see a combination between two different kinds of music. Rap music, which, as you will learn on Wednesday, came to France through multiple different ways, and it's very popular. We'll learn more about the history of rap, but then it's mixed in with Rai music, which is a kind of North African pop music, very much based on the Arab language and Arab singing, which is very distinct from other forms of singing. The thing that French hip hop does better than anything else is it mixes together these sounds of the home country. And the word that they use for the home country, no matter what home country it is bled, B-L-E-D. The sounds of the bled, and then the sounds of whatever popular hip hop there is, and mixing them together. Later on, we're going to talk about Afro trap. Like in probably about a month, we'll be getting to Afro trap. But this right here showed the promise that you could take something. And this is the thing. It's not like American rappers never use North African sounds, right? Big Pimpin' was produced by Timbaland and has Jay-Z on it. And it was like a big hit. You know, like when I was in college, it was a big hit. But there was no actual connection between North Africa and Timbaland or North Africa and Jay-Z. It just sounded cool. And in this way, when American rappers use African sounds, often it's just in this way. It's just kind of a cool affect, something kind of neat. But it doesn't actually speak to their lived experience. This is how it's so different with most French rappers, either being first or second generation immigrants. The music of the bled, the music of the home country, is an integral part of their life. They grew up listening to this, and then they hear hip hop, and then they mix it together. And the result is something which is greater than the sum of its parts and is the reason why everybody should be studying French rap. So let's take this first song as an example. There's Freeman and Karim Leroy. They're from the city of Marseille, which is the main landing point for most people from Algeria. I taught in Marseille. I actually had a student whose name was Karim, and I called him Karim Leroy, and he thought it was the coolest thing ever. He's like, the American thinks I'm a rapper. Someday maybe I'll talk about my history teaching English in France. It was very funny. They loved that I knew about hip hop. And the first thing they wanted me to do was teach about Tupac. And so the first question, that was the first time I ever taught anywhere. The first question I was ever asked in any class was this. Sky, what's beef? What is beef? That was my first question. And I had to tell them what beef was. And this is going to be these two rappers, okay? Like real rappers from Marseille. Like if you live in Marseille, you actually see them. Like I saw them when I lived there. And this mega superstar of Rai music, whose name is Khaled, who is like one of the most famous singers in all of Africa. And so we're going to hear how all these songs, how all these sounds come together in a song, which is a beautiful blend of both of these styles. Now, for you students at home taking notes, this is an essential song which basically always makes its way to the final exam. You just took the midterm. This is going to be on the, I'm just telling you, it's going to be on the final because it does so many things that I love that French hip hop can do. First of all, we see here it says Bladi, which is the Arabic version of the French word bled. Language is very important. We are going to hear a mixture of the languages of the bled whether it's Arabic or other African languages, English, French, and French slang, all four put together. I actually published a paper about this. I'll put that in the description of the YouTube video where I talk about the usage of language in French hip hop. But for now, just let's pay attention to when we hear Arabic and when we hear French. This is actually the city of Marseille right here. So this is where Freeman lives. Right there is Notre-Dame-du-Gard. I used to walk up there every Sunday with my friend Aaron. So this is interesting because it's showing a picture of Marseille, which is where Freeman lives and where he wants to live. But it's a song all about Algeria. It's a song about the home country. It's a song about the pain that he feels about a country which has been, ever since its liberation from France, torn between about 15 different kinds of civil war. It's really hard to keep up with how many different civil wars there have been in that country. And so this song is a mournful, sad song about the feeling of helplessness that he has, that he can't go back to his home country, that he can't really be a part of it. Like he just can't. And just, we're gonna hear the pain in it. So I have to put in a headphone here so I can hear the sound that I'm sharing. Hopefully, I never know when copyright goblins are going to find me and strike me down. I am posting this video on multiple different places. Hopefully you get to hear it. If not, oh well. Wait, oh, I'm supposed to do share computer sound. All right, are you ready to hear some real hip hop? Let's hear some real hip hop. But that's just some Arabic dude saying Bladi and strings. That's not hip hop. How's that hip hop? Still, he's just doing typical lifestyle singing in the
Même en étant plein, y a toujours moyen de se plaindre. Geindre avec mes yeux, des cœurs vont s'éteindre. Rien n'a changé, mentalité du bled, trop né, fraise de fierté, jamais changerai ma peau.
I'm going to stop here because he's rapping very quickly and we see all these lyrics. Even in good times, there's a way to complain. And he says, Hana, nothing has changed. Khonif, he's talking half in French, well, 3/4 in French, a little bit in Arabic here and there. What's interesting about this language switching is it makes sure that the audience is never going to be exclusively French speakers. Like in order to fully understand what they're saying, you have to be fluent in French slang, fluent in French, and fluent in the language of the bled, which creates a whole separate sense of connection to the music for the people who listen to it, knowing it's for them and not for everybody, and not for me. You're going to see there's a whole sentence in this like song that I've never been able to translate. I've played it for people, but I don't know. I'm not friends with any Algerians. I'm friends with Moroccans, and I've played it for them. And apparently, the dialect is different enough that they don't know. So maybe someone will be able to tell me what he says, but we'll get there soon. So we hear here that he's proud of his homeland, but he's sad that nothing has changed.
Le daron là-bas, mon milieu des parents. Faut ce qu'il faut, la caillassement. Intelligent, compté, inculte, escroqué. Bastille du gaz, on fait des fâchés sans bulle à gaz. Sachez, la blanche représente ma fierté. Mon peuple se bat, tu vois, jamais on s'est arrêté.
So here he's talking about the country being a country of gas and of having lots of oil, but not being able to profit from it. And he talks about just missing the stones because Algeria is a very rough landscape. So it's not like he misses a lot of beautiful things. He misses the desert itself. Let's continue on.
Tous les jours des princesses meurent, se meurent. Après l'horreur, le cœur ne vit plus. Sans parti, patrie, si je suis parti, c'est pas de ma faute. Certaines tahan n'acceptent pas leur vie. Trop de...
Okay, and there he doesn't speak in French. He says certain tahan, which is Arabic, I guess, for jerks. So he's saying, I left a country and it's not my fault. So this is what's called survivor guilt. And I mentioned this in class on Friday. This is a very big thing that immigrants feel when they've left a country for a country that has more peace and prosperity, is the sense that they left behind the people who need them. And we're going to really hear that in this song. And this is what I want you to hear in the chorus. In the Bladi, that is the wailing. It's the guilt and the shame and the fear and the sadness that all comes through. And how are you going to get that through in hip hop not too efficiently, at least not as efficiently as these sounds from Khaled are, the way he sings them. Khaled, by the way, lives in France, but was born and his whole career started in Algeria. He's considered an Algerian singer who lives in France, whereas Freeman is a French rapper whose family comes from Algeria. It's all quite complicated.
On te fuit, tu manques, ça t'ancre peu de choses. Je guette mon retour comme un gardien devant sa tour close. Quelques pros pour ma famille que je connais pas. Au 20e siècle, c'est pas admis. C'est pas que je peux pas, mais je veux pas y aller. Je suis pas un Zorro. Je dis seulement ce que je ressens et pas un solo.
This is the line that I've bolded. This is the line that I usually give on the final exam. It's not that I cannot, but that I don't want to go. And this is the real moment of pain for him. It's that he could go. He could be the great returning hero, the big rap star who returns to Algeria and saves everybody. And like the mythical figure Zorro, comes back to save all the people who are lost in the desert. But he can't and he won't because he doesn't want to. And he admits it. He's not making excuses for himself. He's just saying, I can't. I'm happy here in France, but I'm in pain. And I know I'm not alone. But how sad is it? Right? Like he can't save his people, and he's smart enough to know that he probably shouldn't even try.
C'est la ville, le pays, le monde qui crie. Et certains, comme moi, écrivent le bled de mon pays. Plus de liberté d'expression, y'a assez marre. شعل ماتوا عليك الناس يا مصيبة. Seul, 1 heure d'avion nous sépare. Seul sur Notre-Dame à l'horizon, je rêve de...
That's the line I don't know. يا أخي سمع شعول ماتوا عليك يا نسيبة. I don't know what that means. Please tell me if you know.
Voir en bonne santé, quelle gloire pour un pays sans peuple, déchiré, manipulé pour le blé. De là, je pense à toi, le blé de mon pays, Asema avec ses treillis. Est-ce là le prix d'une liberté? D'une liberté oubliée avec cette tuerie, le blé se pourrit. De là, je pense à toi, le blé de mon pays, Asema avec ses treillis. Est-ce là le prix d'une liberté? D'une liberté oubliée avec cette tuerie, le blé se pourrit.
This idea that he thinks of the bled from here. And he thinks of the town Hassima with its fatigues, everybody dressed up in the Civil War. And the real question is this the price of liberty? Like now we're free and what do we have? The bled goes rotten. So right here, we have a great example of so much of what happens in French hip hop that doesn't happen in other forms of hip hop. But this is quite sad and quite miserable. It's not always that case. Often the sounds of the bled, the sounds of the home country are happier and less miserable and less about death and murder. For that, we're going to go to the example of Bisan Nabiso. Now, this group right here, you might not know this flag. That's okay. Not a lot of people know all the flags. This is the flag of the Republic of Congo, okay, which you see right here, not to be confused with the Congo. And this used to be a French colony. Now, if you haven't been taking this class, you don't know all the history of France in the 19th century, but for the most part, the best way to think about it was they went throughout all of Africa, taking whatever they could, subjugating the people, treating them like second-class citizens in their own homes, exploiting the land, exploiting it for resources, exploiting it for people, and then whenever they needed to, maybe taking some people from the Congo and taking them back to France so they could work in the factories. This happened in particular after World War II, where there were a lot of factories that needed more manpower because most of the men, or many of the men, had died of World War II. So we started to see a huge influx of immigrants from North Africa, from West Africa, from everywhere into France. And still in France, the population is declining while the immigration population is inclining. So you need people in order to have a healthy country. So France really benefits from this immigration. But this is a very different story because the history of the Congo and the history of Algeria isn't quite the same, isn't quite as fresh. If you talk about Algeria with a French person, they get uncomfortable. Now, I might someday have, sometimes French people tell me, oh, non, oh, c'est pas vrai ça, non. Enfin, pas de problème, discuter Algérie. But in general, it is still a fresh wound. I would say it's like Vietnam, except I don't think it's the same. I don't think that America really actually still feels Vietnam the way that it should. The Algerian War is still very fresh, but the history of the Congo, while still being a bloody story of repression, isn't quite as bloody, isn't quite as dark. And that is reflected to a certain degree by the music. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen to this group here. Bisan Nabiso. Now, if this were a live class, I would ask my students, what can you tell me about these people? What can you tell me about this group, right? When I've taught this class before, people go, oh, Bisan Nabiso, that doesn't look French, so they must just be an African band, and they must just be some African dudes and an African lady, and they must be from Africa because they're dressed like Africans. They're not. They are not at all. This is Bisan Nabiso without their outfits. They are just normal people, normal rappers from a suburb of Paris called Sarcelles, one of the most dangerous suburbs of Paris. They're from the housing projects over there. Independently, they have their own rap crew that made some of the best rap music of the 90s, which we will get into later in the semester. Arsenic is one of the best groups. And they did this whole project as a labor of love to try to connect to their blood, to their home country. It's not tortured. It's actually celebratory. But it's an important celebration because, and this is a thing that makes French rap interesting, before French rap, representations of immigrants and families of immigrants and Africans and people of African descent was virtually non-existent in French popular culture. You know, America, we had at least, you know, Bill Cosby and Richard Pryor and a lot of different sports stars and Sidney Poitier and many different actors and many different races. In France, it was a lot more homogeneous. It really was hip hop that helped to spread awareness of the existence of non-white French people, both to the French people themselves and to the outside world. And so what this does is this whole album, this came out in the 90s, 98, I believe. And by the way, students, if I ever don't know the exact year that an album came out, that's a sign you don't have to know either. But if I say late 90s, keep that in mind. I had someone on the midterm say that World War II happened in the 60s. So that's the kind of mistake I don't like. Let's keep it on late 90s. We'll stick there. So the thing about Bisan Nabiso is that it was this love of Africa, and it was sort of, the term in French is mettre en valeur. In English, we could say valorizing. It's glorifying their African roots and having fun with it. So Bisan Nabiso comes from the language called Lingala, which is one of the native languages of the Republic of Congo. And the members are all just different members of other groups in French rap. Doc TMC, whose real name is Landry Mahuku, G Kill, Lino, Calbo, Banger, Mystique, Mpassi, and Passy. All these different groups, and you see by their real names, their original birth names, that they have names that originate from the Congo. So let's have a little bit of time here and study the way that this, as opposed to talking about this unbelievable weight of history and pain, it's actually songs that are a celebration of joy, a celebration of family roots, trying to do what, to a certain extent, mainstream French culture tries not to do. They try to explicitly or implicitly put down French cultures which do not fit within the concept of a mainstream French culture. And with music like this, they bring it 100% up. I have to find this slide because I have to find the music here because we're going to listen. You know, I have to do this. I apologize. All right. So we're going to listen to this song. I'm going to play you just the first set of, one second, let me just quit out it. Yeah. I'm going to play you just like the first little lines in the verse here. I'm going to see if I hear it and see if I got the computer all set up properly. I wasn't expecting to have to be a technology expert. Let's see if this works. No? Is this working? No, not working. Okay, let's see here. All right, this work. Now, similar to what we heard before, the intro starts and it doesn't even really sound like a rap song at all. It just sounds like a song which might come from somewhere in Africa, right? We're going to keep listening to it here. I should warn you, the song will be stuck in your head. This is Bisan Nabiso by the band Bisan Nabiso on the album Bisan Nabiso. Okay, I'm going to stop here. 2 lines in. 8 head, grow knees, superstars from the country. There's a French slang called verlan, which, well, it's actually Parisian slang. You can't use it in all of France, some parts, not others, where you invert syllables. So they actually said grenigs, which is actually an inversion of the N-word in English, but they use it in French and flipped around. So they're talking about themselves, superstars of the country. They don't mean France, they mean of Congo. 8 crazies nourished on fufu. What is fufu? This is fufu. It's a popular food in West Africa. And this is another crucial element, that this is part of the joy. Part of the joy of the immigrant experience is enjoying food and talking about food. And what they say is that the last thing to go for immigrants in any new country is food. Like language goes first and then music, but food is always the last thing people can let go of. And we see that all throughout this whole song here, this just love of the food. Okay, let's listen more.
T'en fous du son à fond qu'on brûle le bal. Double S, passif, Benji mystique, arsenic et le Graal. Afro trip, rap, sauce, combo. Frappe des mains sur le bongo, tape de Paris jusqu'à Congo. Des trucs.
Okay, so here he talks about Ngombo rap sauce. So he actually refers to his music as being like this kind of sauce, which is another sauce found in West Africa. Bang your hands on the bongo, traditional African instrument. Scram all the way from Paris all the way to Bakongo, which is a city in the Congo. And already here we have him referencing bossa nova and some zouk and some couscous, which are all different kinds of music that are popular in Congo. So they're talking about the music that they're going to integrate into hip hop while integrating it into hip hop, while talking about other forms of music that they're not, and making it clear that their music is going to be Ngombo rap sauce. Like that is their music. It's awesome.
Rappelle des jumeaux il y a une vingtaine d'années avec leurs locks dressés, pareillement ça c'était maman ça remplace du M3 pour le Bisan Nabiso.
Show you the video, because the video shows a lot of the pride and the joy that goes in to what they're feeling and what they're trying to communicate. Now the fun thing about this video is that all these guys are like in their 20s, but they dress up like old men in the video. And they do this because they're trying to represent the immigrant experience themselves, which is getting together, getting in a plane or getting on a boat and going back to the home country with your family and visiting grandparents and cousins and grandparents and cousins and having a totally different lifestyle than that to which you're used to in France, and you're there and you see it. So they're like, it's this beautiful like transgenerational association where these young people are pretending to be old people and they're imitating old people the way they perceive of old people. And then we're going to get to the chorus, which will be stuck in your head for the rest of your life. Bisan Nabiso, amongst ourselves.
Sans afro, toujours pareil prêt pour un show pro synchro. Jekyll, DOC, danser le nombolo. L'histoire de ces frères, les deux balles nickel, ça marqué des générations entières pour la famille du Biso, 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 Nabiso, Biso, 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 Nabiso. Il y avait Calbo, dans Biso c'était le grand Wandou. Lacoste, Terreau, le dérangez pas surtout. 100% Congo, Weston, Croco, les coucous comme Rocco. Laisse croquer les go, plein de tricks dans les cocos.
Really hard. This is how it starts off. What's that game that you play with the little sticks? Little like balls and the little cups? Oh, someone will tell me what those are called. So both these are great examples of the sort of the happy and the sad that can be communicated. But in both cases, we're finding very much a real sense of what it is to try to represent this music, to try to show how your social identity can be reflected in musical style. Okay. In America, the only time we really have this is, sometimes Wyclef, a member of the Fugees, will integrate some words from Haitian Creole or will include some Creole songs because he is also an immigrant and he comes so directly from that culture. Or any rappers who have any Spanish background bring in, any Hispanic music or any of that kind of influence, we can hear that. But for the most part, we don't have this very direct connection to Africa, which of course is no rapper's fault, right? The slave trade was 400 years ago, and that's not the fault. But what's fascinating is the way that it's different, the way that it creates this whole new kind of rap music that just it's out there. It's just out there. And there's so much of it that's good. And a lot of it doesn't do this. A lot of it doesn't go into like interesting, loops. And it's not all like some kind of bizarre anthropology experiment. A lot of it is just straight up hip hop. But it always has this hanging around in the back that you might be listening to Ngombo rap sauce. So I had my students do something called the Hexagon, which was a song by a guy named Renaud, which makes fun of France and tears it apart. And the term hexagon is what they call France. Okay, like France, the France that you call France is called the Hexagon. But so much of what makes French hip hop different than American hip hop is that it is primarily geographical. So the people who make the music from Paris, and you're going to be learning this soon, don't come from the city center. They come from the suburbs, the places that have been basically forgotten by society, where social experiments have failed, where the social services have failed, where people are crammed in at high capacity with very little state support. Okay, and so there's a physical alienation between the center of the culture and the people who make the hip hop. And so much of that alienation makes its way into the hip hop. There's the other geographical alienation that comes from their home countries being far away and the music being far away and that kind of alienation. But there's a weird fact for you, that the Hexagon is not all of France. There's other parts of France. Like this over here. So if you look over here, right, that's Cuba, there's Haiti, there's Dominican Republic. And do you know what this country is right here? You read that right there. That's France. Yeah, it's called Guadeloupe, but it's a part of France. They spend euros. They have a French president. Macron is their president too. It's not really a post-colonial country. It's still a part of France. And so what is music going to sound like when it comes from there? What is it going to sound like when it comes from the same area that has Jamaica? Well, obviously, it's going to have an extremely reggae-influenced sound. So I'm going to play you just a little bit of another kind of French rap. But this time it's French rap from Guadeloupe, from outside of the Hexagon. So let's listen to this a little bit. This is from 2011. I remember that. First of all, we hear them saying Guadada all the time. That is a word for Guadeloupe. They just call it Guadada. Okay. Now the lyrics here aren't very important. You can look at them over here if you want. In Guadeloupe, things are serious. In Guadeloupe, things are hot. A lot of things are going on. There's good and bad. Let me tell you, everyone wants to be a CEO. The important thing here is linguistically, when I put things in bold, it means they are in Creole. And most of the song is in Creole. So because of that, again, it creates a situation where people in the mainland, people in the Hexagon aren't going to be able to understand it. So we have three different languages that have been thrown around here. We've had some Lingala thrown around, we've had Arabic, and now we have Guadeloupean Creole, all kind of mixed together. And in order to understand all of it, you have to understand all of it. It's fascinating. We'll just listen to this song just a little bit. So what you hear is a very heavy dance hall beat, doom, doom, ka. And when I say that a French person could sort of understand a little bit of this, but really it's all in Creole, right? And they might understand tout le monde le même vle van PDG, but they might know that means everyone wants to be a CEO, but in general, it's completely separate. This is the most extreme example of the islands influencing French rap music in a very real way. And again, what's interesting is hip hop itself was partially born from Jamaica. DJ Kool Herc and a lot of the beginning rappers were heavily influenced from Jamaican culture and the culture of toasting and DJs and all that. So it's funny to see the same kind of influence, but instead of it going from Jamaica to New York, it's going from Jamaica to France by way of Guadeloupe and by way of another part of France, Martinique. So I'm going to leave you with this song. And this is a song we're going to come back to. And this is always everybody's favorite song. It is called Ma Benz, which means my Benz. It's actually a very gross sexual song. We're not going to get into the lyrics now, but I'm just going to play it for you as maybe the best example of how French hip hop can just mix together these different genres in different ways that are completely artistically authentic. And when we get to the final exam in a couple months, and I ask you, what's the difference between French rock and French hip hop? That's going to be the primary difference. There's nothing, not a single goddamn thing, even a little bit inauthentic about French rap music. It is just as real as any rap music made in America, and often even more real. And that's part of the reason I'm so passionate about teaching it, because it's so good, but people don't listen to it because it's in French. Why is it all in French? You're going to learn about that on Wednesday. It's Africa Bambaato's fault. One of the founders of American hip hop told them to rap in French and they listened. So I'm just going to play you the song a little bit. This is just sit there at your home, bang your head. You can try to imagine listening to the song in your car, having it bumped up so much that it makes the people next to you go, why is the bass so loud? But just listen to how great this track is and how all these things mix together. The sounds of the islands, the sounds of French, the sounds of hip hop.
Come back again, no man. Everyone run the track. Every time I'm coming with real. You come along with them inside.
And just to be clear, this is the group NTM. So you can write that down. And it's called My Benz for the students who are going to be getting credit for this. Okay? You don't need to know the words right now. Just listen to how awesome this sounds. So the thing about this is this song was a huge hit, and it did a lot because it brought Martinican culture, it brought Martinican people, it brought children of immigrants and immigrants into the ears of every French person. It completely shifted the cultural conversation and the understanding of what it is to be French. In the same way it did it for America. And we can hear it in the musical style. The musical style reflects their social identity. It took from hip hop and made hip hop better. It's great, isn't it? All right. So your homework is going to be just to send your notes to me. I want to make sure that you have taken notes on each of the songs with just a couple lines about each of them. And I want to just be able to see that you did watch this. Show me that you watched and paid good attention. Okay. And then you'll get full credit. All right. Well, then I will see the class on Wednesday. I will see my auditors. I don't know when, but there's the camera.